I'm going to call the Wednesday, May 8th, 2024 Board of Education meeting to order, and we're going to begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Do we have any public comments? Hello, John.
John Gatchon, Norwich Wesley Road. We did the basket raffle, which was great. Thanks everybody for coming out. But we noticed a kind of a safety concern. When you put the chairs out, you got to put tarps over it. I don't know if anybody saw that, but they got to put a tarp over it, and they didn't want high heels on there because they could get caught. So maybe if you guys or whomever could look into maybe a solution for like matting if they have like drama or productions where they don't have to put an actual throw tarp over there that could cause a trip hazard for people. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Seeing none in the room. I also see no public comment online. So we will move to our monthly financial report. Bill, do you want to come up?
There was a handout with the April report, and it also included some questions from Alex that I answered in the red. And so there was some adjustments to the one that was mailed out on Friday, but the bottom line didn't change that much. So again, we're running similar to last year. There is no issues. We're definitely not going to have a shortfall. No, I'm being conservative, my estimate. So my guess is unless something drastic happens, we should even have maybe a little bit more money left over than is projected here at the moment. We did put in a little bit there were some supply orders and stuff that people were sort of holding on to until usually I tell people to stop at April vacation, then we run everything through to hold their orders. And once we got caught up with the payments and everything, there was still funds available for people to continue purchasing for the rest of the year. So we'll see that. Once we realize some savings in the health insurance, because we've been sort of accruing it based on what we started the year with. We went through it again and took out some people who dropped off in the middle of the year. So we picked up some savings there. We're going to pick up some savings in tuition. We no longer have any students K-12 outplaced. So the last one did come back. So hopefully it's towards the end of the year. So we'll get some little savings in transportation and tuition. But we have to remember, and I sometimes even forget myself, that postgraduate special education students, we still pay tuition for them and transportation to send them to skill training programs. So we can't so when we say there is no outplacement, that's only K-12 students. You still have to remember that we're still paying tuition and transportation for the post-grad special ed students. So just keep that in mind. It's that, oh, it's zero. No, it's not. So just to keep that in mind. With that, they did come back in. So I did reserve a little bit in case we need to use contracted services a little bit more, because now these students are here. So we have to provide services, which could be either using the Bloom contract service or a little bit more paraprofessional help to get through the end of the year. But obviously, it's a huge savings to have students in our high school instead of being outplaced, even if we need to hire an extra para or something, because as we all know, it's quite expensive, including transportation, to send students to an outplaced school. Still being cautious on energy. Electricity for us is sort of tricky to project. Two things is it going to be really hot? We got to crank up the AC. Is it going to be really cloudy? And we don't get the solar power to offset that we might get. So it's conservative figures for conservative figures in there to make sure that we'll cover everything. And then also we have, again, when we've switched from heating to cooling, which we haven't really done 100%, we have to be prepared. Because every time we even look at an HVAC, something seems to go wrong. So, there's money put aside for that too. So I just want to know, even though, I'm showing like now 70,000, again, it's just an estimate. We do have, money encumbered to cover some of these we don't know items. So I think we're in really good shape. And of course, we're not so worried like we used to be, because any leftover money goes into the non-lapsing, which then can be used, later. So not necessarily going to put a lot of pressure on, spend it, because we know we can roll it over to non-lapsing, which is a great thing. And comes to non-lapsing, I think I heard that the legislature passed a new rule that the non-lapsing account can be a Board of Ed account, not a town account, which might make it a little bit easier for us too.
Anyone have questions for Bill?
Yeah, quick question on the electricity. You kind of went up a lot. So how much of about the 12K-ish is kind of margin that you put in for unanticipated extra expenses, I guess?
Probably about 15%.
15. Because it did jump up a lot from March to April.
Yeah, I know. And then I got nervous.
Seems like it's more than 15.
Yeah. We just got another round of billing, so just came in the mail today, so I can, get me a little more accurate next time.
Yeah, it just makes the 70K maybe a lot higher. That's all.
Other questions or comments for Bill on the report? Okay, Bill, I have a few. It actually is a little tricky now because we received your revisions right before the report. So my questions were generally based on the report that we had gotten in the board packet. But as I looked at the difference between the April financial report and the March financial report, I was concerned that there's seemingly huge differences in a lot of the line items. And that projection at the end, we were at 45 and change, and now you're projecting 80,000 and change. I get a little bit concerned only because I feel like as we get closer and closer and closer to the end of the fiscal year, the projection should be more and more accurate. And this seemed like a pretty big shift in the projection. So when I look at, just briefly, you might have to explain some of this to me because I'm sort of digesting it in real time. But it says line 14, extra duty stipends, the balance went from 19.9 thousand to 100.8 thousand. And that seems like a lot of savings in 1 month. That was Alex's comment. And your response is, this has been adjusted. So I'm wondering, what are we actually looking at here? What's been adjusted? Where was it adjusted to?
Well, if you look on the new report, it was, some of the group of the stipends were missing, so I added it to so it's trued up to what it should be.
So when we first received the April 2024 financial report in our board packet, and it said it was $100,000 and change as a projected balance in this particular line item, that was just inaccurate. Is that what you're saying?
Correct,
So the adjustment is just that you've made it accurate.
correct.
Okay. And that is the case for more of these as well?
Well, he mentioned the officials.
Yep,
too.
line 44.
Yeah,
And so in general, you're attributing the increase in the projected extra money at the end of the year to be because of the savings in the health insurance line? It's largely that?
mostly that, yes.
Okay. As I look at this, I'm just concerned that I see a lot of parentheses and a lot of overages in these projected balance in the individual lines. And like I said before, I was hoping that we would be closer to what we budgeted by this time. And without looking at my budget for next year, I look at this and I'm concerned, and I hope that we budgeted closer to our actuals for next year, and that we don't continue to experience this, because while I agree with you that it's wonderful not to have that pressure to think about the end of the year rush to spend, I think the statement that we're not so worried like we used to be because we can roll it into non-lapsing, I don't share that same feeling, only because I don't ever want to look at a taxpayer and say, we're just gonna roll that into non-lapsing, don't worry. And I'm particularly in tune with this because now I've spent the last couple of months talking to taxpayers about how our budget is really, we budget for what we need and that we take this very seriously. And I've been talking to taxpayers about our projected overage of about $45,000, right? Which is about $15,000 more than we put in last year. And so I don't ever want people to think that there's extra in our budget. And I like us to be budgeting really close. And I think that people are well aware that we've absorbed a number of overages in our maintenance line because of our HVAC concerns. And so we've been able to absorb that in our regular budget, and we're projecting this overage. And so while I think it's great that we don't have to rush to spend it, I'm not sure that I celebrate that because I don't think it looks great for us.
So the problem is there's no way, if we budget exactly and then we go over, where's that money coming from? If every line item is exact and all of a sudden we have these HVAC problems, or 3 people show up who want our health insurance and that costs us another $60,000, where's that money going to come from?
I absolutely agree with you that our budgeting needs to be accurate, and it needs to make sure that we're not cutting ourselves short. Where it would come from would be that we would be forced to go to the Board of Finance and ask for an appropriation. And so it's not that those expenses couldn't be covered. Obviously, that's not the way that I think any of us, including the Board of Finance, would like to see things happen. I just want to make sure that as people look at how our budget year is wrapping up, and they know that we've been able to absorb all of this, and then still we're projected to end the year with upwards of $80,000. I think that starts to send a bad message, and it starts to send that message that I get concerned about, that I hear in the public, which is you're padding your non-lapsing account. And that's not what we're doing. And I want to make sure that the appearance of that isn't there. So,
And then, we bring back the students, so we shouldn't bring back the students to save the money because that's not in the budget. Seems a little, you're putting us in a position of the finance department to flatline everything. I can make a budget. I can give you a report every month where there's no changes.
I'd like to see an accurate report every month, Bill, not just a report that says no changes. And I don't believe
Because,
that
'cause it's accurate because I'm reviewing it and it's different from month to month because I'm not just rolling forward. I'm actually trying to analyze each account. So the changes actually show that I'm not just straight lining the accounts, which is what most business managers do, because everyone just looks at the exceptions like Alex does, and he found something, which is great. That's why, you know, you have a finance committee because people will help you find stuff. So I'm re-looking at it, you know, so it actually is more accurate because I'm looking at it every month and calibrating the accounts and not just going, well, in March I said that, so I better say the same thing in April.
I don't think that the report isn't accurate. I think what you just said to me was basically I can make it look like anything that you want. And that is not my request to you. My request is that we make sure, both as employees of the school and as the board that ultimately has to bear responsibility for the Board of Education budget, that we're making sure that everything that we're doing is what we're saying that we're doing. So if we know we need X amount in this line item, we want to make sure to budget for that. And certainly, I don't ever want our finance department to feel like we need to cut ourselves short. But I think we have to be careful.
Well, that's what we did when we did the budget for next year. We used the current year actuals and previous year budgets, and we went through it, gave backup for everything. But, you know,
I guess I'm a little confused because I feel like our goal is to be looking to save money throughout the year. So if we've now ended up in a spot where by bringing students back, by adjusting and looking for efficiencies and by doing these things, we've ended up with more money than we expected. I think that it's just in the way that you phrase that it can become negative. If you're going to say, oh, you're overtaxing people to begin with, no. The process was based on this is what the expected thing is. And then we've managed, I mean, our special ed department has saved hundreds of thousands of dollars this year. That's
Right.
where we've managed to do this. So having $80,000 at the end of the year is still us being incredibly fiscally responsible and turning that around. I guess.
You're absolutely right. And those savings, though, that our special ed department, those hundreds of thousands, that's for next year, right? So we've realized some
Well,
savings.
no,
at
because we
the
brought
end
them
of
back
the
this
year.
year. That's where
Right.
some of those
So
savings
we've
come from.
realized some of that savings at the end of this year by being able to bring them back, which is wonderful. My concern, Chet, is that these are fluctuating with really large numbers, really close to the end of the fiscal year. So that's my number one concern. My number two concern is that when we look at a projection and then we almost double the projection for the end of the year balance within 1 month's time, I think that that starts to not look great. And the reason why I say that is because I am well aware of the community's response to the non-lapsing account and what their concerns have been since the inception of that account around 2020. And so as I speak to people, I like to reassure them about what we're doing. I think we also butt up against the idea that we have padded our budgets and the accounts, the money going into the non-lapsing account. And so I'm particularly sensitive to make sure that that's not the message. And I think this year, while the savings are great, what everybody knows, because it's been a big conversation here at the Board of Finance, at the Board of Selectmen, and at that capital working group, right? Everyone's talking about what do we do with the problem of maintaining the school? The Board of Ed has way overshot their budget. And we have these things that keep breaking, right? We show this year alone, we've spent $127,000 just in our HVAC repairs, right? That's stuff that we didn't budget for, but we've been able to absorb. So at one point, I do get concerned that the message is they can absorb it. So I just want to be cautious. That's all. I'm
So
nervous.
I don't mean to cut you off here, but are you saying then that Troy and Bill shouldn't be trying to find those efficiencies in the budget and then just
No.
say, go to appropriations? That's what I heard you say about 15 minutes ago.
No,
And that's.
Bill said, how would we pay for them? And I wanted to make sure that we're very clear that there
But-
is a pathway to pay for
you're-
them.
But you're undercutting the hard work that
Mm,
Troy and
I'm
Bill have done.
not.
But it sounds that way.
I'm so sorry that it sounds that way. I echo the concerns of the people that I've been hearing from about our budget. And as I've been out at the budget hearing, at the town meeting, at the Board of Finance meeting, things like this sort of stuff comes up, and I just think it's important. So I just want to make sure that when we're budgeting, because as I look through, I'm not a finance person. As I look through, I think, all right, well, this seems okay. Oh geez, this seems tight, but we'll just move it around. But I have, as I start to look at these end of the year accounts and compare them to the last month, I think that's sort of what Alex did, right? Because he saw those big differences, that I do just want to make sure that we're looking at this through a lens of real accuracy, because I'm really comfortable with that $45,000 leftover number. I'm thrilled that we have additional efficiencies. I think it's great. I just want to make sure that our efficiencies are that, and it's not just that we comfortably over budgeted. I want to make sure that we're not doing that, because I want to make sure that when we ask for money, that the town says, oh my gosh, please take the money because we know you're doing such good things with it. I just want to make sure that we're sending the right message and that when we need it, we get our ask.
Then maybe what we need to work on is the marketing aspect of where we save that money. I feel like it's come up a variety of times. I mean, we just talked about the fact that our final student is back in district
So
this year.
exciting. Yeah.
So that's a huge amount of money that we've saved this year. And that's where those savings are coming through health insurance, and that, to me, that's not us padding anything.
I'm not suggesting that we're padding it. I'm just suggesting that it can look at the end of the year like something's not quite right. And I want to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to avoid that because of the absorption of all of the other stuff by this time of the year. I think the health insurance savings is wonderful, certainly couldn't have been, I would think, predicted. I think it's incredible that we've been able to bring back a student at this part of the year and look forward to that huge savings coming up next year. It's amazing. I just want to make sure that this good work is being looked at and is being appreciated for what it is. And I just want to be careful as I start to look at this stuff. I just want to make sure that we're being really careful.
Well, I guess I would just repeat that I think that's our messaging, though, is we've saved this money through efficiencies, through
they
returning
are.
students to the alternative program, because I mean, this is the last one. Like, we were starting off the year expecting more of these kids to be outplaced, and they've all, like, that's all savings this year. So yes, we're also budgeting for big savings next year because we don't have to put that into the budget, which is where that came out of. But those same savings happened this year. Like, that's how we've ended up in this spot, I believe, unless I'm incorrect with that.
Yeah, my perspective, we're looking from month to month on the financials, so I'm looking at accuracy from 1 month predictions to where we're going moving forward. This is a separate conversation, I think, so, which is a good conversation. I agree. If you're covering all your shortfalls, well, why are we covering? Because we're getting the money from somewhere else that we over budgeted for, but certainly, and insurance is a big case in point, went up from $437 or whatever up to the over $100,000. So, and the comment was that we had some people that went off the plan. Did they all go off the plan in March or April, or those are the things that kind of, why couldn't we predict this a little bit sooner, or did we have that information sooner and we just decided to reconcile it in April, or because you're also trying to base budget for next year where you were up to a certain point in time, be it that it's obviously a little bit earlier in the year, but it's just trying to get as accurate as you can. And this month it just jumped around so much. I was very surprised, to be saying the least. But anyway, I think what we want to do is make the right projections, get the data that you have. Maybe it's the process of when we reconcile, like the insurance. Instead of doing it all in April, maybe we do it as we know it, because I assume those people kind of got off the plan by the start of the year or something. But anyway, this is my 2 cents.
Thanks, Alex. Any other talk about the monthly financials? All right, non-lapsing. Does anybody have thoughts or comments on the non-lapsing account report that we got?
The only thing added from last month was the $2,000 that you approved for the Wellness Day expenses. That should be the only change. And I did, it doesn't affect you, but I did receive, some checks went out, and I did send over to the town the checks that you approved, or the invoices that you approved at the last meeting. And I'm still waiting for the payments.
Thank you. I just have a question about how we do things. You know how you're putting, like, so we approved $10,000, we've only spent $7,000, we've got $3,000 left. You indicate that on the bottom of our report now. When do we know that it's done? And that money, like, how does that happen? When does it end? So, say that first one, the Alternative Education Center renovations, equipment, supplies. We've got roughly 9,700 left to spend. When is that, like, good? Does that roll over to the next fiscal year? How does that work?
It stays open until the board says not to spend the money anymore.
How would the board know if all those expenses have been covered?
Well, we would, at some point, we could tell you that too, when we get all the invoices, or we get the, so something like the playground equipment, we know when it's all done, then we would tell you, well, it's done now. But the, Alternative Ed Center, it's still open. They're still sort of deciding what to do down there.
So did you just say that the playground is done?
We still have to install
Okay.
2 pieces of equipment,
Okay,
so it's not done. So we received the equipment, now we have to install it.
so someone will let the board know when it's done.
Right.
Well, you said my trigger words, so,
Sorry, Jamie, I didn't want to say it.
is it possible to just get an update on that maybe for next meeting? Including maybe some of the wood chips have we spent all the wood chips? What's the remaining account on the wood chips? Because I've noticed, I've observed some sparse areas.
I'll add that to the agenda for next time. The only other thing I want to say about non-lapsing is that we had talked about Bob and Susan from the town coming in to talk to us about why they want to utilize a new process with us. Susan is away this week, so I'm going to have them come in on the 24th so that they can have that conversation with us. Anybody else for non-lapsing?
Can I just throw out one future idea possibility? With Little League, we've been using some of the fields over here, and one of the things that was noted by a parent who has girls who play softball is that there's a bullpen for the baseball field, but there are not bullpens for the softball field. It would be a relatively inexpensive project that I think would bring some equity to our both boys and girls programs in that situation, because of the fact that we have that bullpen set up for the boys, but there is nothing set up for the girls on the softball field. Essentially, it would just be an extension of some fence and some dirt and a rubber, right? I mean, you need the rubber for the pitcher, and maybe a plate that's going to sit there. So, I mean, it would be a relatively inexpensive thing. And it seems like a space to use non-lapsing in a way that would be positive for our kids. So
Great. Troy, will you look into that one?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. Fiscal year 25 budget. So we went through the budget hearing with no problems. We had the town meeting on Monday. Troy came with me to the town meeting. We didn't even have any questions about our budget. So
I gotta say Stephanie did a really nice job explaining the Board of Ed budget. It
Thanks,
was very
Troy.
clear.
I appreciate it. It was your
Without-
presentation.
Yeah, but you were pretty direct and to the point without all the fanfare. But Not that you weren't excited.
No, it wasn't
Better-
exciting. I
I
felt
better
bad
stop
that I
talking
stripped
right
out
now.
all the fanfare. We'll find a middle ground. So now we go to referendum. It's been called for May 20th, 8 AM to 8 PM. And I super hope that that just goes well. All right. I don't have any old business on the agenda, new business. I wanted to talk about executive session. So last summer, we were in executive session fully virtually. There was a concern and there was some quick conversation following that, that we shouldn't hold executive session virtually anymore. I don't know that that ever came to fruition in a way that we can say that's our practice now. So I just wanted to have a quick conversation about what do we want to do about that? What do we want to sort of put into our practices and protocols about how we handle executive session? I was just thinking, what if we had a situation, sort of like we did last summer, where Troy needed to pull together a meeting really quickly to go over stuff and we couldn't get in person? Do we want to adopt the practice of only in-person executive session? Or at this point, almost a year later, are we thinking differently about it? Anybody want to share thoughts?
I feel that that executive session is really sacred, and it was compromised last year, and that may just be a reminder that we need to only have it in person. It's just in a nutshell for me.
And I agree with Lisa on that. I think if we're gonna kind of go behind closed doors, we have to be behind closed doors. I don't think that we should be doing it in a virtual setting. I think sometimes links can be compromised, much like an email. So I would say that we are much better off being in an executive session as a group and doing it that way rather than virtually.
Other thoughts?
I was just thinking if the one big emergency, I need something today type of thing, if we do or have it kind of a thought that 99% of them are certainly behind closed doors, but if something comes up that I need an answer in an hour, then what do you do about that?
We only need 5 for a quorum.
I was gonna say, I think one of the things that comes up is that we all like to be very involved in all of the decision-making on our board. However, when it comes down to it, we need 5 of us. And I believe it is written into our policy that the superintendent can actually take emergency action and follow up with the board in those, I mean, something that you need an hour is going to be handled by Troy, and we're going to clean it up after the fact. And that's generally the practice for that. So I would agree. I don't believe that we should change that policy. I like the process of if we have something that needs to be discussed that is entirely confidential within this group, that us being present, and again, as the person who often is running this stuff, every time we go into executive session, I check like 17 different times because I'm like, all right, even I'm muted and we're off and this is closed and everyone's like, it's stressful in that aspect because it just takes a singular mistake in a situation like that where you end up in a bad spot.
Certainly, if you can get a quorum, no matter what, then I'm good with it.
So would then we want to say that if we had executive session and there's like 6 of us here and there's 2 people online, like hybrid participating virtually, that we would not allow those members to come into executive session with those of us that were here? Would that be our practice? All right, so moving forward, executive session, in person only, and that's just what we're gonna do. Good. All right, thank you, guys. I feel better now that we have sort of a clear plan. Troy, you want to talk about email?
Yeah, as you know, we recently had a significant challenge with our email, with our Outlook email, which is all Board of Ed members have an account, and hopefully we were able to support several of you when you said you needed support with logging in or passwords and all that. It's quite complicated. Greg actually typed this up for me. It's a 3-page document that summarizes what happened. And I could hand it out to you if you would like. I could summarize it and then hand it out if you want it. Let me just summarize first.
Right, like, 3 pages, send it to us after, but certainly summarize it.
Yeah, okay. And I don't mind handing it out. Greg is fine if I hand it out as well. It's a nice piece of writing, but it really does summarize. Basically, what happened is we store our Outlook email, or we were storing our Outlook email on local servers. And as you know, one of the goals to being more modern is to do more cloud-based storage. And we had made some preliminary steps to go towards that, but we hadn't quite gotten there yet. And phishing emails come out every so often, and they get trickier and trickier, and anybody can fall for one. And a few of our staff members fell for one. We thought it was one person, and we realized it was two. But what happens is the person that sends out the phishing email now has the ability to send emails from the district. And it looks like it's someone in the district sending these emails, and like thousands of emails like going out like right away. It's like Greg compares it to like a fire hose of emails just coming out. And what happens is then we get on blacklists like AOL, Yahoo emails. Like they won't accept emails from our Outlook, right? So it takes a lot of effort to get off those blacklists. But anyway, he calls it stop the bleed. He didn't say that in here, but that's what I've heard him say before. But basically, shut it down. Didn't erase anything, okay? But after he shut it down, he had to rebuild, and that took some time. We also, after a few days of him working on it, pretty much independently, we called in Learn. And we met with 2 people from Learn who then continued to work with him that very day and the following days on, okay, Greg, have you tried this? Yes. Greg, are you doing this? Yes, I'm doing that. So that was most of it. It was like confirmation that Greg was on it and doing the right things. They did, I gotta say, they were helpful to navigate Greg getting the Outlook email onto Office 365 on the cloud, okay, because they had gone through that themselves. So they had that experience doing that. Greg hadn't had that experience. So that was really helpful to have someone who knows what they're doing with that. Luckily, this whole time, the schools had the backup of the Gmail or Google email account, which they immediately started to rely on heavily. They use it for Google Classroom and a lot of information back and forth with parents already. So that part worked fairly well. So we feel like we're in a pretty good place currently, but still working on a few things and still consulting with Learn on a regular basis. I recently started just a very quick conversation with the town about looking at for some kind of considering our IT as like a town school IT department, because they only have one person and we have 2 in our department. And if we kind of look to them having maybe regular meetings so they all know, Greg has helped the town with their tech stuff, right? When they didn't have somebody, but now they have somebody. And if they were all familiar with technology in both town and school, if something comes up, now we have 3 people working on the problem instead of 1, really. And we could still bring in Learn or outside consultants to help us with things. So we think this was an unfortunate situation that really, really did hinder our functioning. No question about it. But we believe we're in a better situation now, and it kind of forced us to go to cloud storage like we had planned anyway. We just had to get there quicker. And with that, we believe there's going to be less issues with the email. And Learn actually recently did that, and we're going to talk to them about the challenges of having both Outlook and Google functioning in the same district, and what are the challenges with, us sending out Outlook emails about, because they're connected to Infodivisions. And if teachers want to see their pay stub, they got to log on to their email, they get a reminder, by Outlook email. So we have to change all the emails to Google emails and Infinite Visions if we want. Or we just have teachers say, you have to, and you have to log on to this one for this and that. We're also looking to forward emails. Right now, all my emails that come to Google are forwarded to my K-12. And the same with my central office, so we can just check one. So we're working on that kind of thing. I know, UConn, my wife works in the IT department, they had both platforms. And they decided to get rid of Google and just go with Office 365, preparing kids for the future, kind of thing, as college level, right? So they didn't want to keep paying for both. We're relatively small, so we're not paying a huge bill for both, although I can bring that information to you in a future meeting and tell you what the cost of that is. But at some point in time, we might want to all go over to one platform. So we're researching it, but this is something that our combined technology department could also be researching and advising on as well, if we had that. So anyway, I mentioned it, at the town meeting, and Stephanie was there, and, so something I wanna pursue. So anyway, that's it. That's the whole thing. There's a lot of details here, and it really, if you read it all, it makes you kind of understand like all the different complications and why, things happened.
Questions for Troy?
Yeah,
Is
Troy,
there- well,
do you happen to have an, an, and like a tech committee for the district that has teachers, administrators, things like that, to actually discuss some of these concerns as they come up?
That's a great idea. We had planned to do that last year. We never really got to it, but I think it's timely now to get that together. And we do have a couple people that are actually Google coaches and, Google Classroom experts, and they have some ideas, I'm sure.
Because I mean, that might help you, or like help you decide whether or not you keep dual platform, single platform, and maybe other potential changes as well moving forward.
Right. Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, I was going along the same thought process there. Any other vulnerabilities we should look at that may come up, because cloud storage's been around for a while for security. So, here we're kind of still using local servers, which is kind of pretty rare. But anyway, I think we should relook at everything again like this.
Regarding the security, thanks for the reminder. During this whole time, I spoke to Ryan Kashandri, who is in charge of the Connecticut Education Network, which provides internet for like all the schools. And he actually he reached out to me, and I happened to let him know about our email situation. But he reached out to me because he wanted to talk to a superintendent about how can he get school districts to take cybersecurity more seriously, because he's running into little resistance on that. People practice, he said, fire drills, lockdown drills, but they never do like a drill like, hey, suppose we, lose all of our internet, for months. What are we going to do? Or a week? Like, what's our backup plan? How are we going to respond? And so I suggested he contact Learn and say, you got a whole bunch of superintendents right there. You can talk to them all at once. So anyway, that conversation happened during these weeks as well.
You said that the teachers are using it to access their pay stubs and stuff like that. Are we sure that information wasn't compromised?
Yeah.
Okay, and my next thing is for Stephanie. For if, heaven forbid, something like this happened again, would it be possible for the board to get ct.gov emails as a backup and one for Troy? So if something like this happened, we could still communicate with each other?
I don't think that there's a problem. I mean, I think they make new email addresses all the time, so I don't think it would be an issue, but I don't know. I would defer to you guys to talk about like what would be the
So
best.
you're talking about a
best thing.
town email
Yeah.
as a backup?
Right, just
I
as a
think it's a
backup.
great
Like they
idea.
had
We
Gmail, we didn't have anything.
Yeah, I can look, right.
Right.
So I can look into that.
Okay.
That's a
Maybe your
really good idea.
technology department.
The technology department can make that happen.
I have one question, maybe it's in there. what if this happens again? Are we in the same situation?
We're in a different situation. One of the issues with storing on our local server is this filter that all the emails have to go through, and they were getting jammed up in the filter because there was so much traffic of basically these people sending emails out and then emails bouncing back as we got on the blacklist. And then emails are going out and emails are coming in. A lot of emails kept coming in after we shut down the going out part, and it blocked up the filter. There is no filter on the cloud for that to happen. So I don't understand the whole thing, but I do know that by moving to the cloud, we took the filter problem out of the equation. Greg could come and probably explain it way better. And I can give you this, and it might help answer some questions.
Thank you. I guess we'll read it, and then if you guys have questions after we read it, we can put back in the agenda. Just shoot me an email and I'll put it on the agenda.
Sorry, I just have one other question because we did get an announcement from the elementary school that they're still experiencing problems. So like, what do you think is the timeline for that to be resolved?
I don't know. I'd have to look to see what issues they're experiencing.
It sounds like the office is still having some communication issues.
Okay. We can look into that and see, but as far as I was aware, they should be functioning well, and I don't think there's any reason for them to be having issues, but I'll look into that. I didn't know that they just sent that out.
It sounds like the emails that are coming in, they're not receiving. People are emailing the front office or the
Oh.
office, and they're not receiving them. So they're not getting notified of certain changes. So they actually suggested that you email and text Ms. Gonzalez because she's not receiving all the emails.
Okay. I'll have to look into that. It's first I'm hearing of it, which is not great.
Do we want to just add it to the agenda for next time, and then we can touch base again about where we're at and make sure everything's good?
Wait, I'm gonna ask one last question here. I know you said like the teachers have a Gmail account through the school, and I know Judy had asked about a CT.gov, but I know the Board of Trustees at NFA, all their accounts are the same Gmail account that NFA has. Why don't we just have a backup using the same system that's in place there, rather than trying to create a third email, set for the school to use in case of something like this happening again, or not not this happening, but maybe the next iteration of this happening again. Would that be something that could potentially happen? I don't know. I don't know how your
not
system for Gmail set up, but I know as we use it as that's the only email system we use for the entire district. So all of our members, board members, teachers, faculty, staff, we all have those accounts.
Yeah, well, I mean, there shouldn't be a problem with just giving you all a Gmail. I can talk to Greg about it and see what he says. That makes sense.
Okay, I'll add it to the agenda just so we can get updates next week or in 2 weeks, and we don't lose sight of it. Okay, policy. Chet and Lisa put together some. Lisa corrects me and says Chet, not Chet and Lisa. A first read. I looked through them and made some notes today. I don't know, does anybody else want to chat about anything at the first read, or do we want to wait until the 24th?
I think the goal of the first read is to wait. I guess the only thing I would say is when you're reading it, understand that advocacy can be a policy as opposed to a bylaw. If that's something that we want to move forward with, and yeah, so.
Chet, where are you finding that other districts are putting advocacy?
CABE right now is recommending advocacy within policy. So the stuff that we're getting out is putting advocacy into policy as opposed to into bylaws. I do believe, honestly, all of these ones on the first read, when I look at a lot of them, I feel like they don't necessarily belong in our bylaws, for one reason or another. They seem, you know, 90-30.1 seems more like a manifesto as opposed to a bylaw. And I was a little thrown by having these in there in the first place. I think that they may be things that we either look to eliminate or migrate.
I kept writing overwhelming on top of all of these as I was like quickly looking
The
at.
90-30
I'm
point,
glad-
the first time I read the 90-30.1, I was like, oh, goodness, why is this a bylaw?
Yeah, this was strange.
Yeah,
I had
it's,
the same
uh,
problems.
These are overwhelming.
But
I'm glad we have that kind of flexibility.
and
Okay.
largely unnecessary.
Okay,
Like, I
good.
feel like most of these things are enshrined in law in ways that don't require us to state them within bylaws.
I mean, the
and again,
Constitution tells us some of this
right?
stuff, right?
And,
Yeah.
and the advocacy piece of it, I do think, first off, I have to be honest, as a board, we generally have steered clear of some of it. Although much of the CABE policy process is pushing the idea that, no, we do have a strong role and we should. Even our advocacy one in here has multiple misprints and sentence fragments and frustrating language, for me at least, frustrating language because of the way that it's worded. But so I would just ask that we read them in the lens of, are these bylaws? Do we believe that they are inherent to the structure of our board? And is that something that we want to have enshrined in that bylaw piece, which is a much more significant piece of our written code, so to say, than other places might be, so.
Thank you for giving a larger framework for these. I've found them to be difficult. So that's really helpful before we talk about them next week.
So and maybe Irma can help me with this, because I was looking to try and find the advocacy piece from CABE recently, and my password doesn't work on CABE anymore.
Same.
So I can't access the things on there, to be able to reference that coming in. And so we must have gotten a new password and I just missed it. Or, well, it was probably in the email, last week. But one way or another, I wasn't able to get on, because I know that there was an advocacy policy recently that I was hoping to bring along and just be able to say, hey, listen, this is kind of what this looks like. But yeah,
Well, we could talk about it next time.
for sure.
That
Well,
sounds-
that's what, and that'll be my goal. I'll try to get out to people the advocacy policy piece, and the way that would work. So.
Perfect, thank you. Moving on to approving our bylaws. So according to my notes, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, all of these bylaws, we are totally fine with the way they're written, with the exception of 9005, which just has like a duplicate bullet in it. So maybe if someone wants to make a motion to approve the three other than 9005, then we could talk about the edit to 9005 and do it.
Can
it
I
easier
just
to
throw out
follow?
and this is just a possibility, and if people are against this, that's fine as well. But I feel like a huge portion of these things got approved on the same date in the past. And what I'm wondering is, if over the next year or over the next 6 months, we're looking to hit these bylaws all the way through, do we want to wait and do a massive consent agenda approval at the end of that process? So we have one date set in the bylaws that we can then look to work off of in the future, where we say, okay, in 3 years, we're going to do this again, sort of a thing, and we have that set. Or, because otherwise what we're going to get is,
All different dates.
yeah, like over the next whatever. So I don't know. I don't know what people's appetite is for either way. I don't know that it makes a huge difference, other than the idea that it looks a little cleaner within that. However, that being said, that puts a lot of emphasis on the idea that we reach the end of this and have all the changes we've talked about, all of those pieces, instead of doing them individually. So I want to throw that out as an option and see what people thought.
I like that idea a whole lot. especially for a future board who may want to, or Troy or whoever who may want to look back on what we've done, and they don't have to look in 25 different places and dates, and there's one, and it's all in one spot. I think that's efficient.
My only concern about it is, I think sort of what you were saying, which is we don't know where the end of this process is right now, and it puts a little bit of pressure on us to like get, it's not a bad thing. And if I defer to you and Lisa to say, like, we have a plan and we think we can get this done, you know, by this date. I just don't want us to have all of this great conversation about bylaws and we're all agreeing to changes or not changes, especially the ones that have changes. And then all of a sudden, we want to reference a bylaw, but it's like not our
So,
bylaw.
Well, and so the secondary piece of this that we can do, because on some of these, I think that, you know, it's good to have, like, if it's gonna take us 9 months to go through this, we don't want the bylaw to wait that long to change if what we're looking for is a significant change. And so the other suggestion that I was thinking was that we could do this piecemeal along the way, and then when we reach the end, we have a big celebratory, no, when we reach the end, we have just one large motion where we say as a consent agenda that we set these as revised and approved on this date for all bylaws, and have that be a mass aspect at the end. So I mean, that way what we get is the changes individually as we go along, and then we get one large consent agenda at the end
I
that's
love
going
that
to just state
idea.
that.
I love that idea.
Okay.
Also,
In that
maybe-
case, I would like to make a motion
do it.
to approve bylaws 9,000, 9,000.1, 9,005 with deletion of duplicate, and 9,010.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Irma,
Sorry,
do you need,
I jumped on that discussion ahead of time. I'm
no,
so
it's
sorry.
perfect. Irma, do you need the, or you know what it is? Okay. All right.
Thanks, Aaron.
If there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed. Abstain. Perfect. Motion carries. I am so happy to hear that we have like a plan. That makes a ton of sense. Good. Any comments for future agenda items? I think we've already sort of got two natural ones, the playground stuff and the email updates. Also Bob and Susan coming on the 24th. Anybody else?
Any updates on the field and all that issue?
I was gonna let Bob, yes.
Okay.
Bob was, contacting the people for quotes. We spoke yesterday. He had a question, and so he's like well entrenched in that, and I'm hoping that we have like a real update on the 24th.
Perfect, okay. Yeah, I guess like anything that's outstanding on the non-lapsing is kind of where I'm, like, just making sure that we're good with that.
That sounds good. If there is anything that you're seeing that's outstanding on the non-lapsing, do you want to send me an email so I make sure that we have information specifically as it relates to that? Any other agenda items?
Just on the next budget review, just update the comments, because some of them are just repeats and really doesn't give much insight for the change things.
And then all I have is that I want to thank Lisa for doing the heavy lifting on,
It's from all of us, and thank you all for contributing. I appreciate that.
you put a huge
They appreciate
effort,
it.
a huge effort in. She did way more than that. Those things you saw in the picture she made. It's those cucumber sandwiches, the ganache things, the fruit skewers. It was really amazing. Jason and Lisa. Well, I totally appreciate it, and I'm sure the teachers did. Thank you so much. Any public comments? None in the room.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. We will adjourn